Hello, and welcome to Greet the Week. I am Mona Duncan, and the purpose of this little outing every Monday is to help us to live in the now, because this is all the time that is at our disposal. And it also is to help us to accept everything that comes to us in life, to accept it with gratitude, knowing that it is bringing a lesson to us, either one that we uh, embrace or one that we think, oh no, but we realize it was something that we needed to know. Today's topic is on, let me put a screen up here. Today's topic is looking at rules versus principles. And I like to define the different shade or the variant that I'm looking for in the topics and the words that I choose to use. One, in looking at versus, it's to show the contrast of a rule or a principle, as opposed to looking at being in opposition with or in being in competition. And then rules. It can go all the way down from just a mere suggestion to being an absolute law. But I like to look at it more in the middle ground of giving instructions, seeing guidelines, or looking at the system and how that system is running, whether it's smoothly or not so smoothly. And basically, we as human beings, everything we do has a system to it, whether it's putting on our shoes or making the bed or preparing something, or we have these systems. So it's looking at how they are working. And then we're going to look at the comparison of, or the contrast with, a principle. My company that I have, I call it Solution Principles, because I so deeply think that there is a principle that can bring a solution to anything in life, that it is acceptance of, is seeing the value of, the ethics and the etiquette behind it, so that we can handle everything with peace. So here, put the title on this particular slide is Ask Marilyn. And Marilyn Vos Savant writes a column in the Parade magazine. And just yesterday, I was reading this and I thought, oh, this goes hand in hand with today's topic. Someone asked her said, I know that you're not like a Dear Abby or a Dear Carolyn Hax. You are the type of person that goes more with scientific. But this man talked to her and said, you have such sympathy and such depth of interest that could I please ask you this one question about etiquette? And then the problem is, I hate it when people fight over paying a check in a restaurant. It is so uncomfortable for everyone at the table. Can you suggest a way to avoid this conflict? And I absolutely love her answer. She said, here is what I suggest. When someone else asks for the check, don't intervene. That's annoying and sometimes downright offensive, depending on the diners. And if you're the one who asked for the check and someone else intervenes, let him or her pay with no hesitation. If more and more people adopt this practice, the issue will diminish over time. And I find that, because basically I'm hearing her say, accept everything but attach to nothing. As we begin to realize that it is what it is, so what, now what? So accept everything but don't attach to it, or don't have a fix-it mentality. Let it work itself out so that it can flow. So it's recognizing the value of having internal control or self-talk. And coming up just real soon, Sue Tomaszewski is going to be doing a whole thing on making sense of it about our self-talk. But listen to our internal values. Recognize that everything we do comes from an internal control, but we need to be aware of it before we can act upon it in a way that is accepting but not attaching to. So this past week, I had the privilege of doing a certification class. And one of the things that we looked at was some of the questions that Robert Bolding had asked at an international Glasser conference in Raleigh, North Carolina in 2017. And one of the questions that he asked was, can we look at the chart with fresh eyes, say in 3-dimensional? And the chart that he's talking about, if you're not familiar with reality therapy and choice theory, is that it is a diagram of how the brain works, but it is using a vehicle to see how the systems run, whether it's effective or ineffective. And we got to talking about 3-dimensional, which is not only the flat and the height, but it's just all the different dimensions. And so in our certification class, we began to look at degrees and how it's not a, when you need to plant a seed, and that seed is planted and that seed is full within itself. It's that apple seed is really the whole orchard, but it takes a while for it to get there. And so that seed needs to be planted and needs to be worked on and nurtured so that it can grow and will become what it is to be in the fullness of time. And I was thinking about that as I was doing some errands the other day, and I noticed a church marquee, and it had on there, it said, because I'm going back to reflecting of what we had looked at in the certification class, and looked at the fact that on that church marquee, it said, love God, love people. And it was like it was just one thing following another. And in looking at life and what we think and where we come from internally, I thought of a story because, I do love people, but I haven't always. I've had a really difficult time getting along with people. Or maybe I should say they've had a difficult time getting along with me, and therefore I wasn't that liking toward them. And I remember the child that was awakened by the thunderstorm, the story of a kid, and he ran in and hopped in bed with his parents. And his mom and dad was telling him, go on back to your bed. Everything's okay. It's just a little thunderstorm. It's not going to, it's all okay. We're safe. And the little boy, I think he went back one time, but then again, he comes and hopped in the bed again. And he said, I know, but tonight, now I need someone with skin on. And sometimes having another dimension, we have to see it from a more simple aspect. And so for me to begin to love people, I realized I had to make a decision to be less judgmental of others. And because we can only give what we have received, it also meant being less judgmental on myself. And so the continual, not only making a decision, but continually acting on the decisions that we've come up with, it begins to bring about internal shades of love, that we can begin to be more accepting of the person that is acting out, whether it is the child through innocence or the out of the child age and acting out through arrogance. So, spirit of versus the dictates of. So what is the essence? What is the shade of who we are? And I've mentioned this before, but I think it's so vital that whenever you go to the law of the public park, that if you have your animal with you, that dog, assumedly a dog, I guess a cat if it needs to be, that animal is on a leash. But not only is it on a leash, the basic principle of it, or the spirit of, is that, yes, that the dog has a collar on and that there is a leash attached to the collar, but also the spirit of it says the end of that leash is in the hand of the dog owner or the dog master. so that the dog is not running around, neither is it jumping up on people. And so I look back on my years in Toastmasters and the beauty of lexicology, to looking at the power of words, because every word has power. It has power in that how it was coined for original use. It also has power in how that we, the people, use it and abuse it, the words. Add to them, take away from them, disavow them. And one such word is truth. And I think about truth and, what is truth? Not that I'm here to, I don't even know what it is. I'm not here to define it for anyone. But I was reading in A Course in Miracles that truth has no opposite. That caused a lot of deep thinking there. It's kind of like a lot of choice theory axioms that gives you some pause for thought. What do you mean there's no opposite to truth? Well, there definitely are degrees to conniving or fibs. And sometimes we get kind of conniving, or we try to, put something in a different light. It all goes back to our perception and how we see it, or how we think we see it, although we never see it in all of its clarity. And sometimes we think, well, it's just a little small thing and there are no consequences. But it also takes me back to appreciate Toastmasters and how that in every gathering we had debates. And it was learning to give your point of view and listen to another person's point of view without getting into the dictator or the difficulty. And so it reminds me of Dr. Glasser's structured reality therapy, and how that there's 5 questions in structuring what therapy does this couple need. Goes back to a couple, a husband and wife, that are contemplating, well, they're having difficulties in their marriage. And so they come to Dr. Glasser, and he tells them right up front that he's going to ask them 5 questions in order, and that he will be asking them to answer those 5 questions in order. And if they do not answer accurately, or not accurately, there's no accuracy to it, but if they do not answer it honestly, then we won't go on to question 2. It's very, very structured. And so once we make a decision with something, that we've made a decision to love people more, so that we can have an essence of at least liking, we need to be real structured in what we are listening to ourselves and what we're saying to ourselves. And so, again, back to the certification, I did a PowerPoint on breaking the chain of causation, because there is a cause for everything. Everything has a cause. But we get to that, often we get to the point that because this happened, this has to happen. This happened, it tripped me up. This happened, I have to do that. This happened. But that's not necessarily true. Because this happened, it means, I can see it sooner, stop it quicker. I can begin to see things differently. I can begin to think about them in a broader scope. I can begin to look at the spirit of rather than the dictate of. I can be accepting of rather than attaching to. And so let's just suppose, and I like to use an accident, or what people call an accident, as an example, that all the conditions were met, and there may be lots of people on the highway, lots of things that were involved in that collision. But the source of the cause does not eliminate the consequences that was affected on all the quote unquote innocent people that were a part of being involved in the collision. And what kind of. So it's looking at the fact that everything matters. Everything matters to a degree, because in the Parade magazine, on Sunday. There's a story in there on Rita Moreno and her portrayal in West Side Story, which was a long ago movie about racial divides and learning to love people and get along with them and relate to in a difficult time, in a difficult situation. And it has an article in there about her, about how that she at age 90 is there was a director that is recreating West Side Story, and Rita Moreno, no, she's not going to be the young lady falling in love with the young man, but she is a viable character in the new movie that's coming out, and talking about great success and how it's just, and she talked about she did not see it as having such a huge amount of success. It's like, what? Question marks, question mark. How can you not see yourself as being very, very successful? She says, well, every day I go to work, I do some kind of work. And not only that, there are things in my life that are on the back burner. And so tomorrow is the worldwide remembrance of Pearl Harbor. And it is looking at the fact that the VA reports, well, the fact that there were 16 million Americans involved in World War II. And the VA reports today that there are 234 veterans that die each day. And Stephen Sloan, back when, a Baylor University professor, instituted the Institute of Oral History, where different people would get different stories from veterans and what their seed was and how it grew to become something else. And the book that, one of the books that came out of the Institute of Oral History is tattooed on my soul. And the fact that the things that we do make such an imprint on us, on our internal knowing, on our internal doing, on how we see things from the inside out. And he talked about Rufus Spain, who landed on Omaha Beach and stayed in that vicinity and others for 3 years. And in the process of those 3 years, he wrote 300 letters home. So what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that everything matters, the benevolent and the malevolent, and that as we are seeing at life and working at things to the nth degree, which is as much as we possibly can with our current tools, knowing that every time we come to the table, whatever table it is, every time we come to a discussion, whatever the discussion is, we are bringing with us everything that has impacted us in one degree or another from the day of birth until what we are doing now. And so, with what degree are we doing that? Because there are different degrees of matter. Now, there's no degrees of truth, because truth is truth, but there are degrees of matter and how much they impact us. So I saw a Hobbes cartoon that the little boy was just crying because the character was crying and was really upset because he had lost his little playmate, his little rabbit, his little whatever the toy was that he carried around. And his parents was trying to tell him that everything is going to be okay and it doesn't really matter. He'll show up. He's probably around here somewhere. And it shows the little character. I guess it's Calvin and Hobbes. And it's Hobbes was lost and Calvin was sad, and his parents are trying to console him and are ushering him into bed, even though he is crying. And he says, well, it matters to me. And so again, whether it's the malevolent or whether it's the benevolent, it matters to us what the degree. and Wheel of Fortune. We watched Garland and I watched Wheel of Fortune last night. And here was the words that were there, and someone buzzed in. And they buzzed in and they saw the answer to be lavender lamp. Well, that wasn't it. It was lavender soap. But Pat Sajak, who has a lot of humor, but he also is a very gracious host. And when he realized that that person put lavender lamp, that was not the correct answer, and someone else buzzed in and said lavender soap, which was the correct answer. And he gave the answer, the puzzle, the winning correctness to the person that said lavender soap, but addressed the person that had said lavender lamp with the fact that, yeah, maybe you were thinking of lavender lava, or lava, that goes with the lavender. Anyway, I remember a time I was at a conference, a Glasser conference, and Carlene was the presenter, and she was talking about when she and Bill married, that they agreed together for their relationship to be based on choice theory, and that there would not be external control. And she talked about being a new bride and wanting to, anyway, preparing a meal. And she calls him to come because lunch is ready. And he acknowledged the fact that lunch was ready, but he didn't come in to eat. And he didn't come in to eat. And he didn't come in to eat. And I don't know how many other times, I think she had asked a couple of times or so. And it was one of his times whenever he was really in deep thought, going to the depth of one of his concepts of trying to see something a little differently. And she talked about how that she really learned. Again, it was going back to accept everything, but attached to nothing. And lunch is ready. And when he's ready for lunch, it's okay. And to not be a coercive partner. Well, Garland and I, in February, we are coming up on 55 years together and counting. But I'm telling you, we're still negotiating. We're still looking at, and when we do, it's a both and dilemma. It's whenever we decide to respect self and respect others. Now, Garland, from the very beginning of knowing this guy, his motto was, let's hurry up and go so we can get back. He's a real homebody. And I like going, but I like to do a little more exploring. So what if this is not on my agenda? I may want to go there. So needless to say, we take individual cars quite frequently. And so whenever I have to be getting along and being more negotiable and to going with principles rather than dogma, whenever I'm out, and I will call to give him more information that I'm going to be longer than originally thought. And he's okay with that. He is okay with that. But if the more information is not there, may not be quite so okay with that. And so it is learning to decide to respect self and to respect others. Think you can do it? Well, I think you can. And in doing so, it expands the circle. The circle. What is the circle? Well, it's a little poem that comes from Bartlett's Book of Quotes. And it does not give the name of the author. But this has been a little poem that has been so effective to me. And I want to share it with you. And maybe you see the effectiveness of it also. He drew a circle. And we need to look at the fact that that can be he, she, they. They drew a circle to shut me out. Rebel, heretic, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. we drew a circle that took them in, took him in, took her in. So as we begin to look at the fact that all we control is ourselves, and is that which we can begin to, it's always a both and, not necessarily an either or. And that as we can begin to have even just a fledgling kind of like or acceptance of someone else, it can begin to expand that spirit of loving, that spirit of caring, so that we can have more peace with ourselves and definitely with others. Well, thanks for being here, and many blessings.